We have an update on the two fraud boys being chased by the FBI in Ghana. But before bringing you that update later in the day, let us address a press matter. Yesterday, Wicked Blogger Ghana updated the public on the current state of the Russian content creator, Yaytseslav, stating that he is on the run in his home country, Russia. We reported that Russian authorities stormed his apartment in Moscow, Balashika, but he fled before the police arrived. Russian authorities are reportedly angered by the embarrassment brought upon them, and in line with their decision to build strategic relationships with African countries, they do not appear opposed to handing Yaytseslav over for prosecution. The Russian embassy in Ghana has issued a press statement confirming that it has taken note of the developments and is cooperating so far. In its official statement, the embassy noted that the Embassy of the Russian Federation in the Republic of Ghana has taken note of the reports in the Ghanaian media on the alleged involvement of a supposedly Russian citizen engaged in sexual activities with some Ghanaian women and recorded and circulated those acts without consent. This development comes after the government of Ghana reportedly mounted pressure on Russian authorities to take appropriate action or face possible diplomatic implications. Meanwhile, Wicked Blogger Ghana can confirm with absolute certainty that an update was received from the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation, Russia's main authority for serious crimes, including fraud, exploitation, cybercrime, and organized criminal activity. Any former criminal case in Russia passes through or is overseen by this body. According to the update, Russian authorities initiated an arrest process. But upon arriving at his apartment in Moscow, Balashika, he had already fled the scene. Our checks with the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, commonly referred to as the Russian police and responsible for arrests, custody, and preliminary investigations, also confirmed the same report. However, our message to the Interpol National Central Bureau Russia was unanswered at the time of filing this report. Ghana is currently leading the push for justice ahead of Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, where the content creator is also reported to have traveled to film his sexual encounters with women. Going straight to the issue, without sentiment or detours, the question of whether the Russian content creator Yaytseslav could be extradited to a country such as Ghana is not a matter of internet outrage or political desire, but of legal architecture, timing, jurisdiction, and the choices made by states involved. While it is widely known that Russia generally does not extradite its own citizens, that principle is not an impenetrable shield in every circumstance, nor does it automatically end the discussion. Extradition is one pathway among several, and in specific conditions, it can become legally and diplomatically viable, especially when a case is structured properly and supported by coordinated international pressure. The starting point is jurisdiction. If alleged criminal conduct occurred within Ghana's territory, Ghana has primary jurisdiction over those acts. Jurisdiction does not vanish because a suspect leaves the country or holds a foreign passport. Crimes are anchored to location, victims, and evidence, not nationality. If Ghanaian citizens were affected, if acts were committed on Ghanaian soil, and if Ghanaian laws were allegedly violated, Ghana has the legal right to investigate, charge, and seek custody of the suspect. That right exists independently of whether the suspect is physically present in the country. Extradition becomes relevant when a suspect is outside the requesting state. Ghana, like many countries, can issue an arrest warrant and transmit it through international cooperation mechanisms. This is where the process becomes strategic rather than symbolic. A poorly prepared request goes nowhere. A well-documented case, supported by evidence, victim statements, digital records, financial trails, and platform cooperation, becomes harder to ignore. Extradition requests are not judged on morality or headlines. They are judged on whether the alleged conduct constitutes a crime in both jurisdictions, whether due process is respected, and whether the request aligns with international norms. The commonly cited barrier is Russia's constitutional rule against extraditing its citizens. That rule is real, but it is not the end of the legal story. First, extradition law operates alongside other mechanisms. Russia may refuse extradition but still choose to prosecute domestically based on evidence supplied by the requesting state. That outcome while not extradition in the narrow sense, still delivers accountability. Second, extradition becomes more plausible if citizenship status is complex. If an individual holds multiple nationalities, if Russian citizenship was acquired later in life, or if legal questions arise about which nationality is operative for the alleged conduct, the legal analysis shifts. These are technical issues, but they matter. Another pathway arises when crimes are characterized in ways that trigger heightened international concern. Allegations involving sexual exploitation, non-consensual recording, distribution of intimate material, or monetization of such content engage international human rights obligations. When multiple states are affected, the matter can be reframed as transnational exploitation rather than isolated misconduct. That reframing increases diplomatic pressure and narrows the space for quiet dismissal. States are increasingly sensitive to reputational risk when they appear to shield individuals accused of exploiting vulnerable populations abroad. Ghana's role in this context is particularly significant. Ghana has positioned itself as a state that takes cybercrime, exploitation, and cross-border financial offenses seriously. If Ghana builds a case that is procedurally sound, evidence-driven, and respectful of international law, it strengthens its standing as a credible requesting state. Extradition is more likely, or alternative cooperation more robust, when the requesting country is seen as capable of conducting a fair trial, protecting rights, and managing complex cases without politicization. There is also the reality of movement. Even if Russia refuses to extradite, that refusal binds only Russia. The moment an individual travels outside Russia, the legal landscape changes dramatically. An arrest warrant recognized through international channels can be executed by other states. Travel becomes a liability. Each border crossing becomes a risk assessment. In practice, many individuals in similar situations become confined to one jurisdiction, effectively limiting their freedom indefinitely. That outcome is not theoretical. It is a common consequence of unresolved international cases. The importance of this case goes beyond one individual. It tests whether African countries can assert legal authority in situations involving foreign nationals who allegedly exploit digital platforms and cross-border mobility. For too long, there's been a perception, sometimes encouraged by silence and fragmentation, that African jurisdictions are easier to bypass, slower to respond, or less likely to pursue complex international cases. When that perception exists, it attracts exactly the kind of behavior that undermines sovereignty and harms citizens. A coordinated approach matters because evidence is rarely contained within one country. Digital exploitation cases leave traces everywhere. Servers in one country, payments processed in another, victims located across borders, content distributed globally. No single state can assemble the full picture alone. When Ghana collaborates with other affected African states, the case gains depth and credibility. Patterns emerge, intent becomes clearer. What might be dismissed as coincidence in isolation can be recognized as systematic conduct when viewed collectively. This case is also important because it sits at the intersection of technology, consent, and power. The law is still adapting to the realities of content creation and monetization. Many offenders rely on ambiguity, assuming that informal agreements, cultural differences, or delayed complaints will protect them. A strong case clarifies that consent must be explicit, informed, and specific, and that exploitation does not become lawful because it is filmed, edited, or branded as entertainment. Establishing that principle in court has lasting value beyond the immediate outcome. From a diplomatic perspective, the case forces states to articulate their positions. Do they cooperate in protecting victims, or do they default to narrow interpretations of sovereignty? Do they engage constructively, or do they allow legal gaps to persist? These choices shape international relationships. Ghana's insistence on accountability, even in the face of complexity, signals seriousness. It tells partners that cooperation is expected, not optional. Extradition to Ghana, while challenging, becomes more plausible if the case is framed not as a political demand, but as a legal necessity grounded in evidence and victims' rights. It becomes more plausible if Ghana demonstrates readiness to prosecute fairly and transparently. It becomes more plausible if other affected states align their positions and support the request. Even if extradition does not occur, the process itself can yield substantial outcomes: domestic prosecution elsewhere, travel restrictions, asset seizures, and long-term monitoring. Ultimately, the importance of this case lies in what it establishes. It establishes whether borders still function as shields in an interconnected world. It establishes whether African states can move from reactive outrage to proactive legal action. It establishes whether digital exploitation is treated as a serious crime or dismissed as controversial content. And it establishes whether individuals who leverage mobility, nationality, and technology to avoid accountability can be confronted through lawful, coordinated means. Going direct, the truth is this: extradition is difficult, but not impossible. Accountability is inevitable if states act with discipline. And the significance of this case is not measured by where a person is today, but by whether the system responds decisively tomorrow. Ghana's pursuit of justice in such a matter is not just about one suspect. It is about asserting that African citizens are not expendable, that African laws matter, and that no passport grants permission to exploit and disappear.